I'm Steve Nolan, Major, United States Air Force, retired. I was a career mental health officer. At least most of my career was in mental health. Early years, I was what's called a line officer in Electronic Security Command, but went to graduate school, became a licensed mental health professional, and spent the rest of my military career, Army, and then Air Force again, as a mental health officer and chief of mental health for several bases and a couple of military prisons, and finally chief of combat stress for Paktika province in Afghanistan before retiring. And then I ran a PTSD clinic for the VA for 5 years. I've recently published a book called American Carnage, An Officer's Duty to Warn, because with our present situation, our present commander-in-chief, I felt that I had a double duty, a duty as a clinician from everything I learned in my career, and certainly dealing with this type of mental status and mental pathology for over 2 decades, and a duty as an officer for what I see as a grave danger to the security of this country due to the mental status of this individual. I'm going to start by reading something right from the beginning of the book, the first pages of the book, to set the tone for the mental status component of this. This is right from the prologue. Many clinicians have spoken out or written about the mental status of this president out of a duty to warn. This phrase refers to the limits of confidentiality in situations where the client intends self-harm or harm to others. In those circumstances, it is understood that the responsibility to the greater good overrides client-therapist privilege. While not able to formally diagnose a non-patient, a clinician can and should warn others when they see imminent danger. The purpose of this book is likewise not to diagnose, but to inform what a particular diagnosis looks like in a position of leadership, and in this case, vast power. In this case, the danger is so great that mental health professionals have felt strongly that obligation to warn while refraining from diagnosing, because it is a public health and safety issue. We are experiencing one of the most critical moments in our nation's history, and it is directly dependent on the mental health of the sitting president, whose impairments are doing demonstrable harm to our citizens, our democracy, and the world planet. There's no clearer example of a duty to warn than this. In June 2019, I had a conversation with a U.S. congressman trying to explain why it appeared that we had our first personality disordered president. He said to me, "I think all politicians are narcissistic personality disorders." He meant large ego, which is not mental impairment. This is the problem when a term like narcissism has a common lay meaning. I conceded that politicians, movie stars, pop stars have larger-than-life personalities, and we sometimes use pejorative labels like egomaniac, but this is not the same as mental illness. I explained to him that he and most politicians were capable of feeling sympathy and empathy, know truth from lies, understand right from wrong. This misconception, confusing a large ego with a very real and potentially dangerous pathology, is silencing those who need to speak out and threatening the checks and balances needed for the survival of the republic. Now, anyone can look up, and I could read on, and I'm not going to read these boring things right out of the manual, what's called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. But anyone can look up, and I encourage them to look up the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, and decide for yourself. And I think you'll see that the President of the United States meets all the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and almost all the criteria for antisocial. But as I said to the congressman, I'll give you a shortcut. And all those points need to be absorbed and they're relevant. All the different traits of this person that appears to be what the congressman thought was an egomaniac. And they're all relevant. But a shortcut, as I said to the congressman, was think of someone who is incapable of sympathy and empathy. They are pathological liars, and they don't know right from wrong, and they can't choose right over wrong. They're very confused by that concept. There's no moral compass. And so luckily in the military, we have so many rules and regulations, they usually get in trouble. And that's how we identify them. Because with this particular disorder, they do not respond like a normal mental health patient and feel symptoms. They feel normal. So they don't have mental health records. They get in trouble and they break the law. And that's how we catch them. And indeed, that's how we even catch criminals and even how we end political careers is usually someone having scandal and illegality. But that didn't happen this time. The other thing that is disturbing to me is, and how this has gotten so out of hand, is it seems to me that so few members of Congress now have been in the military that they have failed to see in the commander-in-chief what would clearly have led to their own being dismissed from the military, or anyone else, any other troop being dismissed from the military. These views, pathological lying alone would eliminate anyone from any job, even in the civilian, lying to your boss, lying to your subordinates. But it's this lack of a moral compass. It's this lack of defending the Constitution. It's going way overboard in things that completely violate the Constitution. It presses the enemy of the people, thinking that fascists and neo-fascists and neo-Nazis are fine people rather than people that are actually disqualified for military service. And you certainly don't have to be in the military to get these concepts. We have ex-presidents that were never in the military, and they were great patriots, and they got it, the it being the Constitution of the United States, the one oath that the president takes, members of Congress take, and everyone in the military takes the same oath to defend that Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I've seen this in the congressional leadership, and I had to conclude that it is from their lack of military service, so many of them, that they could not see what was wrong. I didn't expect them, without a book like mine, to understand it as a mental illness, as a mental pathology. But they still should have seen what was wrong with a president that could attack a POW, Purple Heart recipient, Vietnam veteran, a very honored and revered American hero, Senator John McCain, who spent more than 5 years in Hanoi Hilton and endured torture, and to have a president attack that person is just an abomination, and they should have come to the defense, members of Congress. Same with Captain Khan, when the president went after his parents, an Army captain who died defending his men in Iraq, or Sergeant Johnson's widow, pregnant widow, when the president got into a back and forth with this recent widow. Her husband was just killed in combat in Niger, Africa. And their allegiance, and had they served in the military, they would have automatically, out of a sense of band of brothers, band of sisters, defended those who needed defended, who died in honorable service to our country. And that didn't happen. And then the next indication for me that something was wrong, and that too many members of Congress, because they haven't served in the military, there's an abdication of responsibility or an abdication of even seeing what's going wrong. Like in Charlottesville, when neo-Nazis and KKK and white supremacists are called fine people, when actually these are all people disqualified from military service. So it's impossible for them to be fine people. They're actually enemies of the Constitution, domestic enemies. Or when the president in his rallies started to go after this opposite party in a very hateful way, and started with Democrats are for crime, and then Democrats are unfit to govern, and kept ratcheting it up. Eventually, as the rallies went on and the months went on, Democrats are mentally violent. Democrats are out to destroy the country. Completely unacceptable language, but again, especially unacceptable for a commander-in-chief, because the military is made up of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And no commander-in-chief is allowed to suddenly say that one group of military personnel, and imagine some of them are in uniform in combat zones serving, that they're suddenly unfit to govern, and they're mentally violent, and they're out to destroy the country. And as General Mattis told us, former Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, finally, a year after his resigning over issues like this, wrote an op-ed where he said the president is dividing the country, and he doesn't even have any interest in the appearance of unity. And it's carried on into this pandemic where you see the president he's taken this red and blue states to such an extreme that he even talks about blue states or blue cities not being worthy of support or financial support or federal support. And again, you would have people in uniform serving in combat zones who are from those cities, or if they're not a Democrat themselves, their brother or their sister or their grandparents who live in those blue cities are suddenly not worthy. And this is just unacceptable for a commander-in-chief. And I think this has gotten way out of hand because so few members of Congress can recognize what's completely unacceptable, unprecedented, off the scale abnormal, and unacceptable. Now, the reason why it's so abnormal, again, I urge people to get my book because I break it all down clinically so that connection can be made, that this isn't just odd. This isn't just the reality TV star, or he was a businessman, he was never a politician, or whatever rationalizations people are trying to make. Why is this guy so different? And get clear, because it's not odd or quirky or Donald being Donald or any of that. It's diagnostic. And I break it down. I have a section, a chapter called The Tweets, and I break the tweets down clinically in a section called The Rallies. In fact, I will read from the book some sections from The Rallies to illustrate my point.